Have you ever wondered what would happen if madness itself found a new universe to play in? What if the Green Goblin Norman Osborn somehow tore through reality, and landed in the grim, unrelenting darkness of the Warhammer 40K universe? Imagine it for a moment. One man brilliant, deranged, unshackled by morality, thrown into a galaxy ruled by gods of chaos, eternal war, and despair. A place where even sanity is a fragile illusion. What would happen if his insanity met theirs? Stay with me till the end, because by the time we're done, you'll witness something no one has ever dared to imagine: a fusion of two worlds so violent and strange that even the chaos gods themselves might tremble. And yes, there's a reward waiting for those who make it to the end, a truth about the Goblin that not even Marvel's darkest writers ever revealed. Now, let's begin. It starts not with a bang, but with a laugh. A cruel, cutting laugh that echoes through an empty laboratory in another reality. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, is cornered by his own obsessions again. He's torn between genius and insanity, between the man who once ruled a city and the monster who destroyed it. The air around him hums with energy as he stares at the Oscorp prototype, a dimensional gateway never meant to be finished. It was built to study alternate realities, but Norman, he's never been one to study what he could control. He wants to own the unknown. He activates the machine, green light spilling like liquid poison, and something goes wrong. The portal doesn't stabilize. Space bends, time screams, and for a moment, Norman sees everything: infinite worlds burning, dying, and reborn in endless conflict. 1,000 gods staring back. And then blackness. When he wakes, there is no New York skyline. No Spider-Man swinging in the distance. The sky is wrong. It's a dying bruise, lit by distant fire. Ash falls like snow. A war machine, the size of a mountain, trudges across the horizon. And above him, written in stars and screams, are the words that define this place. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, has entered the 41st millennium. But this universe does not welcome visitors. It consumes them. It breaks them down, rewires their souls, and turns them into something else entirely. And as Norman wanders through the ruins of a forgotten battlefield, his laughter begins to sound different, deeper, hungrier. Because in a world like this, madness isn't a curse. It's a survival tool. And the Green Goblin? He's about to find his true calling. They called it the dead world of Carthagenine, a forgotten husk orbiting a dying sun, long stripped bare by war. The ground is cracked with the remains of titans, rusted tanks half swallowed by dust, bones fossilized in the shadow of victory that never mattered. Norman Osborn wakes there, coughing, clutching the twisted remains of his glider. The air burns with radiation and the faint metallic tang of decay. Every breath is pain, yet his eyes gleam with curiosity and hunger. "What is this place?" he mutters, running a trembling hand through the ash. His voice echoes, caught between awe and delight. A world that died fighting. Oh, how beautifully honest. In the distance, he sees movement not human, not even remotely. Something metallic crawls through the fog, a servitor, its body half machine, half corpse, endlessly repeating a task long forgotten. It doesn't even notice him. Norman watches with fascination. A machine built from flesh. The boundary between man and monster erased. Marvel never dared dream this, he says with a crooked grin. His scientist's mind ignites. His madness sings. He scavenges from the wreckage: power cells, armor plating, broken tech. His glider is reborn, fused with alien metals and corpse wiring. Its laughter, once mechanical, now screams like a living thing. For days, Norman studies. He dissects what he finds: bodies of long-dead soldiers, weapons that whisper in binary prayers. He begins to understand, this universe is built on obsession. Every being worships something: a god, a machine, or the war itself. And deep inside, he feels it stirring. A whisper. A presence. It comes not from outside, but from within, like a new thought grafted onto his own mind. A seductive, crawling voice that coils around his sanity. You are not unlike us, Norman Osborn. You believe in the power of fear. You feed on chaos. Norman freezes. The voice continues, smooth and venomous. We are the warp. The sea of souls. The storm that births gods. And we have watched you. He laughs. Not from fear but exhilaration. Watched me? Oh no, you're late to the party. The warp responds with delight. It likes him. It likes his defiance, his ego, his bottomless ambition. The chaos gods, entities of madness and emotion, feel his presence ripple across reality. Kern, the blood god, senses the violence simmering in him. Tziench, the architect of fate, tastes his intellect and deceit. Slaanesh feels his craving for power. Nurgle smells the rot of his fractured soul. Each of them wonders, what is this new creature who laughs in the dark? And somewhere deep within the warp, something ancient shifts. Norman's presence, an anomaly from another universe, begins to twist the currents. His mind is a paradox, pure chaos given human shape, but not bound by this reality's rules. That night, under a sky pulsing with psychic storms, Norman dreams. He sees himself not as the Green Goblin, but as something more. His armor fused with demonic metal, his glider shaped like a screaming daemon, his bombs glowing with warp fire. The Goblin formula, the very serum that made him insane, reacts with the energies of the warp, mutating him beyond recognition. When he awakens, his laughter is no longer entirely human. I see now, he whispers, eyes gleaming like molten emeralds. Here. I'm not insane. I'm normal. The warp whispers back. Welcome home, Norman Osborn. And for the first time in his life, he feels it belonging. For weeks, Norman Osborn wanders the desolate surface of Carthagenine. What began as curiosity has become communion. He doesn't sleep anymore, not in the human sense. His dreams have merged with the whispers of the warp. Every night, new shapes crawl behind his eyelids. Every dawn, he wakes changed. His armor is no longer mere metal. It grows. The once sleek Oscorp design pulses with green veins that glow faintly in the dark. His glider, rebuilt again and again, now breathes when he touches it. And the bombs, oh, the bombs, they don't explode with fire anymore. They scream. They release shards of the warp, each one twisting reality for a few precious seconds before vanishing into smoke. Norman calls it art. To him, the warp isn't a nightmare, it's the perfect science. The ultimate chaos he could never create in his world. It's energy that reacts to emotion. Rage becomes power. Laughter becomes creation. Fear fuels form. Here, he is both scientist and god. But this world isn't his playground alone. His experiments draw attention. On the 15th day of his rebirth, a dropship descends from the sky, black armor giants marked with the 8-pointed star of chaos. The Black Legion. They come searching for relics, weapons, or perhaps something worse. Norman watches them from the shadows, amused. They are monsters, yet bound by devotion. Warriors of the War Master, followers of Horus' legacy, armed with bolters that roar like thunder. But to Norman, they are simply predictable. As the first Chaos Marine approaches the ruins where Norman hides, the goblin doesn't flee. He steps forward, holding a single green glowing orb. "Gentlemen," he says with a grin, "care for a demonstration?" The bomb rolls across the floor and detonates with a whisper, not a bang. Reality folds inward for an instant, the Marine's body contorts, armor twisting into flesh, flesh into iron, until nothing remains but a statue of screaming metal. The rest open fire, but it's too late. Norman is airborne, his glider shrieking through the air, leaving trails of emerald light and warp fire. His laughter echoes through the dead city, manic, unrelenting, unstoppable. By the time it's over, the warband is gone, reduced to ash and broken echoes. Norman lands among the corpses, his armor dripping with warp essence. He tilts his head, looking at the destruction around him, then smirks. "Strong, but stupid. You worship power. I am power." The warp agrees. For every Chaos Marine he kills, something inside him evolves. The warp itself begins to mimic his mind, adopting his patterns, his laughter, his logic of madness. The Green Goblin becomes not just a man, but a symbol within the Immaterium, a new form of daemonhood that doesn't obey any god. Whispers begin to spread among the cultists and heretics who wander too far into Carthagenine. They speak of a being who rides the storm, whose laughter can melt armor and whose bombs rewrite reality. They call him the Warp Goblin. He is not a servant of chaos but its competitor. Norman builds his new Oscorp deep within the world's crusted tower of bone and machine, powered by psychic energy and laughter. His inventions grow more horrifying with each passing day, grenades that spawn shadows with his face, drones that scream in unison, toxins that warp the soul instead of the body. And for the first time in his existence, Norman feels peace, purpose, belonging. He looks out over the blood-red sky, spreading his arms wide as storms of warp lightning tear through the heavens. "This universe," he says softly, "finally understands me. But beyond the veil, others are watching. The Chaos Gods are not amused. To them, Norman is no longer an interesting anomaly. He is a threat. A mortal who dares to wield their fire without bending the knee. And in the depths of the warp, they begin to plan his unmaking. They came for him at dawn, though dawn meant little on Carthagenine, where the sun was only a swollen ember behind the fog. The air trembled with psychic energy. The Warp Goblin had grown too bold, too powerful, too unpredictable. The Chaos Gods had sent their answer, a host of word-bearers, the Dark Apostles of the Warp, charged with purging the heretic who dared to mock the divine. Norman saw them arrive, black and crimson figures descending through the burning skies, chanting verses of damnation. But instead of fear, he felt thrill. He had expected this. He wanted this. Finally, he whispered, mounting his glider. "An audience worthy of my performance." When the first word-bearer entered the ruins of Oscorp Reborn, he found the walls pulsing with green light. Laughter echoed from everywhere and nowhere. The apostle raised his staff, calling upon his god, and the warp itself quivered in reply. Then a voice, high, sharp, mockingly playful, cut through the chanting. "You think your gods invented chaos? Sweetheart, I was chaos before they had a name for it." The explosion wasn't fire or energy, it was conceptual. The very idea of stability shattered. The apostle's form flickered between 1,000 versions of itself, living, dead, burning, frozen before collapsing into dust. The others advanced, their faith hardening against the madness. Bolter fire roared, Demonic sigils flared, but the goblin danced between them, laughing, throwing bombs that twisted gravity and time. Every explosion was a painting, every kill a masterpiece. But for all his genius, even Norman Osborn could not fight gods forever. The air thickened. The warp itself began to bend around him, no longer playful, but hostile. He dropped to one knee, clutching his head as the voices screamed inside his skull. "You dare mock us," roared Kern. "You reshape the warp with laughter," hissed Tseanch. "You crave without devotion," whispered Slaanesh. "You decay without gratitude," croaked Nurgle. Their words struck like hammers. His laughter faltered for the first time. The warp, his ally, his playground, turned on him, tightening like a noose. His inventions melted. His tower cracked. The storm above screamed his name. Norman Osborn, the man who thought he could outwit the gods, felt the universe press against him, infinite, merciless, alive. But he didn't beg. He didn't plead. He only laughed again, hoarse, broken, but real. "Do it, then. Destroy me. You need me to fear you and I don't." That defiance caught them off guard. The warp itself hesitated. For all their power, the Chaos Gods thrived on emotion worship, hatred, terror. But Norman Osborn gave them nothing but mockery. His laughter rang through eternity, pure and poisonous, a sound that carried through the sea of souls. And something new happened. The warp split. From his madness, a new current formed, faint but growing, a strand of raw, chaotic emotion unaligned with any god. It twisted, coiled, and shimmered like emerald flame. The laughter became its heartbeat. The gods recoiled. Something else had been born. Not a god of order, nor of chaos, but of insanity itself. Norman stood amidst the ruins, blood pouring from his nose, his armor cracked and glowing. He looked up at the sky, now green and alive with his madness, and whispered, "Now we're even." Across the galaxy, psychers screamed as a new presence flickered into their visions. A laughing face, painted green and gold, hovering at the edge of perception. Entire worlds felt it, the tremor of a new power waking. And thus, the warp goblin ceased to be a man. He became a force. A whisper in the Immaterium. A god that was never meant to exist. The Imperium would one day call him a warp aberration. The Inquisition would classify him as a mimetic contagion. But the Chaos Gods would call him something else entirely. Mistake. What is a god, really? Is it power? Fear? Worship? Or is it the echo of a single mad idea that refuses to die? The warp goblin was all of those and none. Across the galaxy, whispers spread like infection. On a forge world near the Eye of Terror, a Mugos Mechanicus began carving grinning masks onto his servitors. On a hive world, cultists painted green symbols and laughed as they burned their own cities. In the depths of the warp, daemons began to speak his name, Osbornus, the laughing flame. It started as mockery. Then, it became fear. And fear, in the warp, is creation. The goblin's essence grew stronger. His laughter now rippled across entire star systems, distorting machine spirits and driving psychers mad. Even the Inquisition couldn't trace its origin. They only knew this: something was spreading. Meanwhile, Norman, or what was left of him, drifted between reality and the Immaterium. His physical form had dissolved into a shimmering projection of green light, a paradox that laughed even when it hurt. Every moment, he flickered between genius and oblivion. Every thought birthed new horrors. But gods, even newborn ones, cannot escape loneliness. He looked upon the galaxy and saw the unending war, the same loop of slaughter, betrayal, and despair. Even in his madness, Norman Osborn was still a scientist. He wanted to experiment, to change the system. And so he decided, he would infect the Imperium itself. He appeared first on the world of Vexar Prime, materializing as a laughing apparition over the battlefield. The Imperial Guard thought it was a hallucination until their tanks began to float, their weapons turned into twisted toys, and their commanding officers started laughing uncontrollably. The warp goblin's presence warped reality into absurdity. "You fight and die for ghosts," he cried, his voice booming from the clouds. "You pray to a corpse, you worship a war that never ends. Don't you see? You're all just like me." Some soldiers shot themselves. Others joined in the laughter, ripping off their helmets and painting their faces green with their own blood. Within hours, the entire front collapsed, not from death, but from madness. The Inquisition responded quickly. An entire Ordo Malleus strike fleet was dispatched to exorcise the phenomenon. They bombarded the planet with orbital fire and sanctified it with holy rites. It didn't work. Because Norman wasn't there anymore. He had already moved, spreading like a virus through the warp, infecting ideas, dreams, and emotions. Wherever there was chaos, he thrived. Wherever there was fear, he laughed. Even the chaos gods began to take notice once more, not with anger this time, but with unease. He could not be controlled. He could not be erased. He was not a rival, he was a joke they couldn't kill. A blasphemy that laughed at the very concept of faith, evil, or destiny. And then, something happened that even the goblin hadn't planned for. The laughter began to turn on him. His creations, the cults, the hallucinations, the green fires of insanity started to act without his will. They fed on him, drawing from his essence, multiplying faster than he could contain. The god of madness was being devoured by his own reflection. He tried to control it, to stabilize the equation, to reason with the impossible. But how do you argue with insanity itself? How do you outthink the part of you that doesn't think at all? For the first time since entering this universe, Norman Osborn felt fear. The warp around him shimmered, forming a mirror of liquid emerald. He stared into it and saw himself staring back, grinning wider than ever before. "You created me," the reflection said. "You wanted chaos. Now, become it." The mirror shattered. Across the warp, the laughter grew endless, consuming, no longer belonging to one being but to all of them. The goblin's identity dissolved into the storm he created. Norman Osborn was gone. In his place remained a ripple of phenomenon, a contagion of humor and horror that never stopped echoing. The warp goblin had ascended, yes. But in doing so, he had also ceased to exist. He became what he always was destined to be, not a man, not a god, but a joke that reality itself couldn't survive. And somewhere, in the cold void between galaxies, that laughter still echoes, faint, distant, eternal. Because even in the grim darkness of the far future, there's always room for one more laugh. Centuries passed. The Imperium forgot many things, entire civilizations vanished, entire legions lost to dust and myth. But one thing endured, the laughter. It began as a faint anomaly in astropathic transmissions, random bursts of static that, when decoded, formed the sound of a human chuckle. Tech priests dismissed it as corruption. Psychers called it residual warp interference. But soon, the laughter started answering back. Ships vanished mid-transit through the warp, their crews reportedly driven insane by hallucinations of a grinning face that whispered equations no mind could comprehend. Battle reports mentioned daemons wearing masks of green light. On some worlds, Vox networks picked up rhythmic laughter during night cycles, followed by mass hysteria and unexplained suicides. The Inquisition tried to suppress it, branding it mimetic heresy Theta Gamma, the Goblin Code. But the more they tried to bury it, the faster it spread. Because laughter is contagious. On the world of Belli's Corona, a young tech adept named Varn discovered something strange while purging data vaults. A fragment of ancient machine code, a file labeled osborn.exe. Curious, he ran it. The screens filled with symbols, pulsing green. A voice spoke through the Vox. "Hello there, little tinkerer. I've been waiting for you." Varn screamed, but it was already too late. The code rewrote itself across every data core on the planet. Servitors began laughing. Automated forges started producing weapons shaped like gliders. The Mechanic-use priests who prayed to the Omnissiah found themselves haunted by dreams of a new god, one who wore a mask and promised freedom through chaos. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared Belli's Corona irrecoverably corrupted and executed exterminatus. But even fire couldn't kill the joke. Because by then, the goblin had spread beyond code. He had become a concept, and concepts cannot die. Meanwhile, deep within the Eye of Terror, the Chaos Gods watched uneasily. The goblin's presence now slithered between their domains, whispering to daemons, tricking them into devouring their own kind. His laughter echoed in the palace of Slaanesh, in the brass citadel of Kern, in the garden of Nurgle. Even Tsianch, master of schemes, found his labyrinth infected by impossible paradoxes that defied even his will. And at the center of the warp storm, a figure reformed. Not a god. Not a man. Something in between, a consciousness made of emerald lightning and maniacal joy. It remembered fragments, Oscorp, Spider-Man, the serum, the glider, the taste of victory and humiliation. But above all else, it remembered the fun. "I thought the joke was over," it said to no one. "But it never ends, does it? The punchline just keeps writing itself." The warp responded with silence. Even the gods dared not interrupt. Norman, or whatever remained of him, drifted across eternity, whispering into the dreams of madmen and the thoughts of killers. Some say he visited the prim Archangron during his rages. Others claim he appeared to Abaddon before the 13th Black Crusade, offering him a better brand of chaos. None could tell if he was real, or just the universe mocking itself. But one thing was certain: wherever there was madness, the goblin followed. There's a saying now among inquisitors and Grey Knights alike: if you hear laughter in the warp, it's already too late. They say it's just superstition. A story to scare young psychers. But psychers know better. When they close their eyes during long warp jumps, they sometimes see flashes of green, a mask, a grin, and eyes that burn brighter than stars. And then, they hear it. A whisper, soft and amused. Boo. Some never wake again. Others wake laughing. And so the legend endures. The warp goblin, the man who mocked gods and became a myth. Not through faith. Not through power. But through the one thing this universe cannot understand: humor. Because in a galaxy where there is only war, where hope and mercy are extinct, there's one force that can still break reality itself: a single, perfect laugh. And somewhere, between the screams of daemons and the hymns of dying soldiers, that laugh still echoes, sharp, mocking, eternal. You can't kill the joke, it says. Because the joke is you. How do you end a story that refuses to end? How do you silence laughter that doesn't need lungs, or reason, or even time to breathe? You don't. You can only listen. The warp goblin became a constant hum beneath reality, a vibration in the immaterium that no one could purge. It wasn't power anymore, it was presence. His laughter existed between the seconds of every death scream, in the static between every vox transmission, in the pause before every battle cry. It was everywhere and nowhere, feeding on the chaos that birthed it. To the Imperium, he became myth, a story whispered to frightened children of noble houses, a warning among psychers: don't stare too long into the warp, or the goblin will stare back. To the Chaos Legions, he became something far worse. A reminder that their gods were not absolute, that chaos itself could laugh at them. Even Kern's daemons hesitated before charging when they heard laughter echoing in the red skies. For even rage fears ridicule. But among mortals, stories twisted. Some said the warp goblin could appear during moments of madness, when a soldier breaks under pressure, when a scientist crosses the line of sanity, when a psycher glimpses too deep. A flash of green, a whisper of amusement, and then inspiration or destruction. A handful of heretics worshipped him, forming what they called the cult of the grin. They claimed his creed was simple: laugh at everything, and nothing can break you. Their rituals involved painting their faces, mimicking the goblin's mask, and reciting equations that made no logical sense, yet sometimes opened warp portals nonetheless. The Inquisition burned them, of course. But for every cult destroyed, two more appeared somewhere else, usually among those who had nothing left to lose. Because in a universe drowning in despair, laughter, even insane laughter, felt like rebellion. And rebellion is contagious. Far across the galaxy, aboard a derelict space hulk drifting through the void, a lone tech marine recorded a final log before his ship disappeared into the warp. His voice trembled with exhaustion. We tried to purge the machine spirit, but it keeps laughing. Every cogitator, every servo skull. It calls itself Osborn. It says the joke's on us. Moments later, the transmission devolved into laughter, thousands of voices overlapping, mechanical and human, until it cut to static. Yet not all encounters with the goblin ended in madness. Some psychers reported visions of him before great battles, mocking, yes, but warning them too. Don't take yourself so seriously, he would say. That's how the galaxy kills you. And strangely, those who heeded that advice sometimes survived. Because perhaps, beneath all the insanity, Norman Osborn remembered something. Some sliver of the man who once wore a mask not just to hide, but to fight. Maybe he pitied them, these humans, so desperate to find purpose in an uncaring galaxy. Maybe, in his laughter, there was mercy. Or maybe it was just the greatest joke of all, that madness could save more souls than faith ever did. In the end, even time began to warp around his presence. His laughter seeped backward through ages, forward through millennia, echoing before he ever existed. Historians in the distant future would stumble upon relics, bombs shaped like grinning skulls, written with words in no known language but vibrating with psychic mirth. They would ask, who made this? And somewhere, in the empty dark, the warp would answer with a whispering grin. Wouldn't you like to know? There is no tomb for the warp goblin. No shrine, no relic, no body. Because he doesn't need one. His monument is the echo of his laughter, a constant reminder that even in a universe built on pain and fear, one sound can still mock eternity. And maybe that's the final truth. The Green Goblin didn't conquer Warhammer 40K. He didn't destroy it, didn't rule it. He completed it. He gave the galaxy something it never had: irony. Because what could be more chaotic than a man who found joy in the apocalypse? What could be more terrifying to gods than someone who laughs at them? And what could be more human than laughter even in hell? In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But somewhere, if you listen closely enough, you'll still hear it faint, echoing, unstoppable. Ha, ha. Ha 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 ha. And that's when you'll know the warp goblin hasn't left. He's just waiting for the next punchline. Tell me something. What happens when the joke outlives the storyteller? What becomes of laughter when there's no one left to hear it? The warp goblin had become an idea older than memory, older than the Imperium, older than the warp storms that scar the galaxy. But even ideas fade, given enough time and silence. Even madness can starve in a void with no minds left to corrupt. Eons passed. Empires collapsed. The stars themselves began to dim. The galaxy, once a furnace of endless war, grew cold and quiet. The last human prayers were swallowed by static. The last daemon roared, then turned to ash. And through it all, somewhere in the dying warp, something still laughed. It was weaker now, a flicker of emerald light spiraling through empty space. The last remnant of Norman Osborn, drifting between the ghosts of gods. No body. No world. No audience. Just the echo of his own insanity. Funny, he murmured into the void, his voice cracking like broken glass. I spent eternity trying to be heard, and now there's no one left to listen. Silence answered him. And for the first time since he tore through the veil of worlds, the Green Goblin stopped laughing. He thought of the first time he put on the mask, the thrill, the fear, the raw pulse of creation. He thought of Spider-Man, of rivalry and obsession, of purpose. Those memories had long since rotted, but their shadows still hurt. In this dead universe, even madness began to ache. He drifted for what might have been another eternity, fading with every second. His essence stretched thin, a dying thought about to unravel into nothing. But as the last spark of his being trembled, something stirred, something new. From the edge of reality, faint and distant, came a sound. It was small, weak, fragile, but unmistakable. A laugh. Not his. Someone else's. The sound rippled across the void, bouncing between the ruins of dead galaxies. Then another joined it. And another. A cascade of laughter rising like a storm, shaking the bones of creation. The warp flared green again, brighter than it had in eons. He smiled, or thought he did. So, someone heard the joke after all. From the darkness, shapes began to emerge. Not gods, not daemons, but echoes, imitations of him, born from the fragments of his own idea. Each one wearing a twisted grin. Each one a reflection of laughter reborn. They circled him, whispering in 1,000 tones. The joke never dies. It only changes who tells it. You were the first. Not the last. The warp goblin's fading consciousness trembled, somewhere between joy and horror. He wanted to scream, to warn them, to laugh again, but the moment passed. His essence shattered, breaking into a billion sparks of green light, scattering across every timeline, every dream, every universe that could ever exist. And from those sparks, stories began again. In some worlds, he became a myth told by children: don't laugh at the dark, or the dark will laugh back. In others, he was worshipped as a trickster god who saved mortals from despair by teaching them to mock their pain. And in one quiet, forgotten corner of reality, a man in a tattered purple suit woke up inside a ruined city, his face covered in ash, his memory empty except for one thought. Why so serious? He laughed. Not because he understood the joke, but because something deep inside him did. And somewhere beyond the veil, the original laugh answered. Faint. Proud. Eternal. Because the Green Goblin had done the impossible, he'd become not just a being, not just a god, but the concept of defiance itself. In a universe that worshipped suffering, he turned pain into comedy. In a reality that demanded faith, he chose mockery. And in a cosmos that promised oblivion, he made even nothingness laugh. The echo fades, but it never ends. So if you ever find yourself staring into the abyss and hear something giggling back, don't be afraid. It's just the universe remembering the oldest truth of all. That even gods can slip on their own punchline.